Montana Territory, 1879. The wind rolled hard down from the Bitterroots that morning, snapping the frost-bitten cottonwoods along the banks of the Blackfoot River, when Kenzie Sutton aimed her rifle at the coyote stalking too close to the barn. She fired once. Missed. The coyote scattered, and everything went quiet again, too quiet, except for the soft whimper of her youngest, Grace, from inside the cabin. Kenzie lowered the rifle, her jaw tight. She had not slept. Not really. Not since the night her husband walked out and left her with 2 children and a house full of silence. Grace was 5. Gabriel, her oldest, was 7 and already walking like his father. Head down, shoulders stiff. Not from pride but fear. Kenzie. Gabriel's voice came from the edge of the yard. Someone's coming. On horseback. Kenzie's heart jumped, her fingers tightening on the rifle again. She stepped off the porch, skirts catching in the wind as she spotted the rider cresting the hill, tall, broad in the shoulders, and slow in his approach. Not like a man looking for trouble, like one who had seen too much of it. He stopped at the fence line, dismounted with quiet care, and pulled his hat off. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, "your boy said you had trouble. Coyotes, fences down. I am good with both." Kenzie stared at him. Dust clung to his coat, a tear at the sleeve. His boots were worn but polished. He looked maybe 30, maybe older, with a quiet steadiness that unsettled her more than a drawn gun. "I did not send for help," she said. "No, ma'am. But your neighbor did. Mrs. Higgins. Said you would not ask." Of course she had. That old woman meddled like it was her job. Still, Kenzie let her eyes flick to the children, then back to the stranger. "What is your name?" "Yate Porter." She paused. "You alone?" "Yes, ma'am." Gabriel was already edging closer to him, eyes wide. "Are you a cowboy?" Yate gave a single nod. "I work cattle, ride fence, fix what needs fixing." Kenzie felt her chest tighten. Her husband had said the same things. Before he broke every promise he ever made. "I do not need saving," she said. Yate's jaw flexed. "I am not here to save you. Just lend a hand." She should have told him to leave. But her fence really was down. And Grace had a cough she could not seem to shake. And when she looked at Yate, something in her stilled. Not trust. Not yet. But not fear either. "Fine," she said. "1 week. That is all." He nodded once, respectful. By nightfall, he had the east fence mended and the coyote tracks buried under new dirt. He cooked beans over the fire without a word. And when Gabriel asked him to teach him how to tie a proper knot, Yate knelt beside him and showed him, slow and patient. Kenzie watched from the porch, arms folded tight across her chest. When the children were asleep, she stepped back outside. He stood there, leaning on the post, looking up at the stars like they mattered. "You do not talk much," she said. He looked over at her, eyes the color of burnt earth. "Talk never fixed a fence." She let out a breath. "You love too quiet," she told him, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Yate turned to face her fully. "I would rather show you than say it." Kenzie's breath caught. He did not touch her, did not move closer, just stood there, steady and sure, like a man who meant everything he said, even when he said very little. The next few days passed with a rhythm she had not known in years. Yate was up before the sun, feeding the animals, checking the traps. He taught Gabriel how to shoe a horse and carried Grace when her little legs got tired. And when Kenzie burned her hand on the stove, he wrapped it with a gentleness that made her chest ache. He never pressed, never pried. But when she finally told him about her husband riding off with another woman and leaving nothing but debt behind, Yate only said, "You deserved better." She blinked fast, not wanting to cry. "I do not know what to do with someone like you." Yate met her eyes. "You do not have to do anything. Just let me stay." And she did. One night, a storm hit hard. The roof leaked, the wind howled, and Gabriel crawled into her bed with shaking hands. She wrapped him close, but her eyes kept drifting to the shadows near the hearth where Yate sat with Grace in his lap, whispering a story about stars and horses made of smoke. When the storm passed, and the children were asleep, she walked to him in the dark. "You should sleep," she said. "I will. Just needed to make sure they were safe." Her throat tightened. "You do that a lot. Look after them like they are yours." He looked up. "I would not mind if they were." Kenzie stared at him, heart thudding loud. "You mean it?" "I have not said anything I did not mean." She knelt beside him, wrapped her arms around him, and rested her head on his shoulder. His arms came around her like they had always belonged there. Outside, the wind died down. The house, for the first time in years, felt full. Not just with noise or tasks or survival, but with something warm. With something like love. The wet season settled in slow, soaking the earth until wagon wheels sank to their axles and boots stayed caked for days. The cabin roof stopped leaking after Yate climbed up with cedar shingles, and Tarheed traded a broken stirrup for down in Helmville. He hadn't said much afterward, just wiped the pitch from his hands and sat with Grace while she counted the beads in her hair ribbon. Kenzie kept busy inside, mending shirts and boiling down elderberry syrup to keep Grace's chest clear. She didn't ask if he planned to stay past the week. He didn't offer. But his saddle remained slung across the same rail, and his horse grazed alongside theirs like it had always belonged. One evening, she found him hammering together a new gatepost, sleeves rolled, neck red from the sun. She leaned her shoulder against the barn wall where the light caught his profile. "You always fix things that don't belong to you." He paused mid-swing, eyes sliding toward her. "Doesn't take owning something to know it matters." "That's so." Her voice had a smile in it, though she wasn't quite sure why. He drove the nail in, slow and even. "You can't ride past something broken and pretend it ain't. Not if you've ever been splintered yourself." She went quiet, watching the way he settled the hammer down like it was something living. "What splintered you, Yate?" He didn't answer right off, just leaned on the post and looked out toward the tree line. "My brother died near Fort Benton. Railroad job. Wrong turn of a chain, snapped his ribs like twigs. I was riding east when the telegram caught up. Buried him myself. After that, I stopped heading anywhere in particular." She stepped closer, the earth soft beneath her boots. "You wandered all the way here." "I didn't mean to," he said, "but I'm not sorry I did." There wasn't much else said after that. The sun dipped low, throwing long shadows over the fields, and they walked back to the cabin with the steady pace of people who no longer startled at shared silence. Inside, Gabriel was trying to finish a reader he'd borrowed from the schoolhouse before the ink ran too thin. Yates sat beside him, tracing each word without fussing when the boy stumbled. Kenzie watched them from the stove, ladling soup into bowls. When Grace asked if Yate knew how to whittle animals, he pulled a scrap of pine from his coat and began to carve without a word. Later, after the children were asleep and the fire had burned low, Kenzie brought out the quilt her mother had stitched the winter she turned 18. She laid it over Yate's long legs where he sat on the floor, back against the hearth. "You don't sleep in the loft anymore," she said. He didn't look up. "Only ever did because I didn't know if I was welcome here." Her hands folded in her lap. "You are." His eyes lifted to hers, quiet and steady. "Then I won't go." The clock on the mantel ticked slow. Outside, the wind had laid down. She crossed the room, knelt beside him, and reached for his hand. He turned it over in hers, calloused, warm, scarred down the middle like it had once been split with a blade. She brushed her fingers over it. "You ever tell a woman you love her?" "No, why not?" He looked at her like she'd asked something holy. "Because I never loved anyone the way I love you." Her breath caught sharp in her chest. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't playing at charm. He was just saying what was true. "You love too quiet," she told him. He leaned in, forehead brushing hers. "I'd rather show you than say it." She closed her eyes, let the weight of his words settle into her like the slow drifting of snow on a still roof. Then she kissed him, not rushed or desperate, but with the kind of care that stitched wounds closed instead of hiding them. When she pulled back, his hands framed her face, rough thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "This isn't just for a season, is it?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, ma'am. I'm not riding out." She curled into him, the quilt wrapping around both their shoulders now, the fire casting gold across the worn floorboards. There was no promise made, none needed. The days ahead would be hard, planting, drought, taxes. But the empty place inside her had quieted, not vanished, but filled with something solid. And at the center of it, a man who said very little, but meant every word. By late March, the snow gave way to thaw, and the ground softened enough to turn a spade into. Kenzie stood at the edge of the field with her sleeves rolled and her hair pinned back, watching rows of damp earth open beneath the blade of a plow Yate guided steady behind the mare. The sun hadn't broken the chill entirely, but it warmed the back of her neck, and the sky had that pale, forgiving blue that only came after a hard winter. Gabriel helped tamp seeds into the rows, small hands careful, his brow drawn in focus. Grace sat on a fallen log nearby, humming to herself and threading bits of green grass into her doll's apron. Kenzie kept glancing toward them, she always did, but her eyes returned again and again to the man behind the plow. When Yate finished the last row, he walked the horse back to the barn and unhitched her with methodical hands. She met him there, leaning against the stall door. "You've done more with this land in a month than I managed all last year," she said. "I had help," he answered, brushing dirt from his palms. "You don't take much credit, do you?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "You've been holding this place together on your own." "I just filled in where I could." She studied him, the angle of his jaw, the way the light caught the dust on his collar. "You ever think about settling somewhere? For good, I mean." His hands went still over the tack. "I think about it now." Kenzie stepped closer. "What would that look like for you?" "A small house. Wood smoke in the chimney. Children running underfoot. Work to keep me tired and a woman who wants me close, even when I've said nothing all day." Her voice dropped. "You want all that here?" "I want it with you." Her throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "We've both lost things." "I'm not afraid of that," he said. "Not anymore." They stepped out into the yard, where the children had begun dragging sticks into a crooked square, pretending it was a house of their own. Gabriel shouted something about rooms and chimneys, and Grace laughed, her voice bright in the warming air. Kenzie watched them. "They talk about you like you've always been here." "I want to be," he said, "if you'll have me." She turned to him. "I don't know what being with someone like me looks like. I ain't gentle, most days. I don't always say what I feel." He reached for her hand, rough fingers curling around hers. "Then I'll learn to hear it anyway." They stood that way until the wind picked up and scattered the children's sticks. Gabriel chased after them while Grace called out instructions. Later, as dusk fell, they sat on the porch steps, the house behind them quiet. Yate held a tin cup of coffee, his thumb tracing the rim. Kenzie rested her elbow on her knee, chin in her hand. "You ever think about naming things you build?" she asked. "I've named horses. A dog once. What about a home?" He turned the cup in his hand. "I think it earns its name over time. When the walls know your voice. When the floor creaks under the same boots for years." She looked out at the darkening field. "I want that. A place that remembers." He didn't speak for a long time, just reached over and brushed a loose wisp of hair from her face. She leaned into the touch, and he let his hand rest there a moment longer. "You love too quiet," she said again, almost a whisper. "I'd rather show you than say it," he answered. Then he kissed her. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't uncertain. It was the kind of kiss that settled into the bones, that said everything that words hadn't. When they pulled apart, she didn't move far, just leaned her head against his shoulder. The stars came out one by one, and the night stretched long and soft around them. Inside, the fire dimmed, and the children stirred in their sleep. The land beyond the fence waited for spring's full arrival, but inside that moment, there was nothing left to wait for. He was hers. She was his. And everything ahead, work, storms, laughter, would be faced together. The creek behind the cabin ran higher now, swollen with meltwater tumbling fast over stones worn smooth. Kenzie stood ankle-deep in the rush, skirts tucked into her belt. Her arms plunged into the current where she scrubbed linens against the washboard. Wind pulled at the loose strands of her hair, but left the air warm enough to bare her forearms without shivering. A rustle behind her drew her glance. Yate was stepping down the bank, boots careful on the slick moss. He carried a tin pail and a short-handled axe tucked beneath one arm. "You don't have to chop wood today," she said, wringing the sheet between her fists. "I know," he replied, setting the axe aside. "Wasn't coming to. I brought water from the spring. Sweeter than the well, now the ground's turned." She nodded but didn't meet his eyes. The current tugged at her wrists, and her jaw worked tight. "You all right?" he asked, voice even. She didn't answer right away, just leaned back, water dripping from her elbows. Then, in a tone too flat to pass for calm, she said, "Grace came in crying last night. Said one of the boys at the schoolhouse told her she didn't have a real father." Yate stood still. Then he stepped down beside her, not touching, just close enough for her to feel the warmth of him through the breeze. "I don't want them to grow up carrying shame that ain't theirs," she said. "They've already been left once. They're not going to be left again." She looked at him then, water glistening at her collarbone. You saying that because you mean to stay, or because you don't want to see me cry? He bent slowly at the knee, dipped his hand into the stream, and let the current curl around his fingers before answering. I mean to stay, but I know that doesn't erase the past. I just want to build something stronger than it. Her shoulders dropped, and she exhaled through her nose. Gabriel's been watching you like he's waiting for you to leave. He won't say it, but I see it. I'll speak to him, Yate said. Not with promises. Just plain truth. She nodded once, then leaned back into the rhythm of scrubbing. After a quiet beat, she said, I've still got my wedding band in a drawer. I don't wear it, but I never knew what to do with it. Keep it if it helps, he said, or bury it if it don't. Either way, it doesn't change what we're building now. She looked sideways at him. You always speak that steady? No, he said, only when it matters. They walked back to the cabin together, the pail swinging between them. Inside, Gabriel sat at the table carving a sliver of hickory into a fishing hook. He glanced up, then quickly backed down. Yate set the pail on the counter and crossed to the table. You got a steady hand, he said. That'll hold a trout. Gabriel shrugged. Maybe. Yate pulled out the bench across from him. When I was your age, I carved a hook like that. Caught a sucker fish big as my arm. Thought I'd feed the whole town. Turned out sucker fish taste like mud. Gabriel's mouth twitched, just once. Yate leaned in. You're not wrong to be cautious. Men don't always stick where they say they will. But I want you to know something all the same. I'm not going anywhere. And not because I want to be some kind of replacement. I'm here because I love your ma. And because I care about you and Grace in my own way. Gabriel didn't lift his head, but he nodded. That evening, after the children were asleep, Kenzie found Yate outside repairing the gate latch by lantern light. She stepped out barefoot onto the cool packed dirt, arms folded beneath her shawl. You didn't have to say all that to him. I know, but I'm glad you did. He turned to look at her, hands still on the latch. You ever think about marrying again? The question hung between them, quiet and solid. I used to think I'd never trust a man enough to share a roof again, she said. But then you came along, fixing things that didn't ask to be fixed, waiting on answers I hadn't figured out yet, and never once asking me to be anyone I'm not. He let go of the latch and stepped toward her, slow enough for her to lean into him without flinching. I'm not asking for a ceremony, he said. Not unless you want it. But I'd like to build our life honest. Name it, like you said. She pressed her forehead to his chest, the wool of his shirt scratchy against her skin. Then let's name it. He kissed the top of her head, breath warm against her hairline. You love too quiet, she murmured. I'd rather show you than say it. He answered, arms wrapping around her, holding her steady. And this time, she understood what he meant. Not just in words, but in the way he stood beside her, always just close enough to catch what might fall. The morning Yate traded the last of the winter hides for cedar posts and a thick roll of canvas. The sun filtered soft through the clouds, like it hadn't made up its mind whether to shine or hold back. Kenzie stood at the edge of the pasture, arms crossed, watching him lash the canvas over a wagon frame he'd been piecing together for weeks. She waited until he tied off the last knot, then stepped forward. You planning to take us somewhere? He glanced over, brow shaded beneath the brim of his hat. Not away, just down to Deer Lodge come Saturday. Thought we'd pick up some hens, seed potatoes. Gabriel could see the smithy, if he's still thinking on that trade. She nodded, slowly. I haven't left this land since last summer. I know. Her gaze dropped to the finished wagon plane, sturdy, with fresh iron on the wheels. You built that faster than I thought possible. He wiped his hands on a cloth, then looked up at her. I've done a lot of moving in my life. Felt good to build something meant for staying. Kenzie felt her throat go tight, but she didn't speak on it. Instead, she turned her eyes toward the cabin where Gabriel sat shaping a strip of leather for a sling, and Grace crouched in the dirt drawing horses with a stick. You sure about the smithy? She asked. It's a hard trade. He's sure, Yates said. He asked me how to work a bellows. I told him he'd blister his hands before learning anything useful. He said he didn't mind. She let out a sound that almost passed for a laugh. Sounds like someone I know. That drew the smallest lift at the corner of his mouth, but it faded quick. There's something I want to ask you. Kenzie turned to him, heart suddenly still. I've been thinking on it since the thaw, he continued. I've known hard winters, but this one that was different. There was warmth in that house even when the stove went cold. That wasn't just luck or timing. That was you. She stepped closer, a breeze tugging at the ends of her shawl. I don't want to keep stepping around it, Yates said. I want to marry you. Not to make anything proper or tidy, but because I want to stand next to you in every season that comes. Kenzie didn't answer right away. Her hands, always calloused, now rubbed against each other like she was trying to feel something through the skin. I never thought I'd say yes again, she said. You don't have to, he started, but she cut him off. I'm saying it now, she said. Yes. He didn't kiss her right then. He just reached out and took her hand, pressed it to his chest, and let her feel the rhythm there, steady, solid, and hers. They married the following week, with Gabriel holding Grace's hand and Mrs. Higgins standing beside them with a wildflower bouquet she'd grown in pots through the frost. The preacher rode in from Helmville, his coat patched and his boots soaked from creek crossings, but he smiled wide when he saw them standing side by side beneath the cottonwood. There was no music, just the sound of river water and the wind through the grass. And when it came time to speak, Yate didn't read from anything or fumble for words. I've wandered long enough, he said. I'm home now. Kenzie didn't cry. She didn't need to. Her hand in his said everything. That night, after the children slept and the fire burned low, Kenzie sat at the edge of the bed, hair down her back, fingers trailing the quilt. I thought love was supposed to feel like a fire, she murmured. Fast and hot and gone before you knew it. It's not, Yates said from behind her, his voice low. It's like a fence post sunk deep, holding steady through storms. She turned to him, her body easing against his, breath warm on his skin. Then I'm done running from it. He kissed her then, slow and certain, and the quiet around them settled into something lasting. Years passed. The house grew by a room, then two. Gabriel apprenticed under the blacksmith down in Deer Lodge and came home on Sundays, hands blistered, eyes proud. Grace raised hens and named each one, even when they went in the pot, and learned to read by lantern light with her mother's finger underlining every word. Yate and Kenzie worked the land side by side, planting, mending, building. They argued sometimes over tools, over fence lines, but always in the way of people who knew they were rooted in the same ground. On their porch, most evenings, they sat with their boots off and shoulders touching, watching the sun drop low over the pasture. You still love quiet, Kenzie said once, years from that first spring. Yate looked over, eyes soft beneath his hat. You still hear me anyway. And she did. They lived that way, steady and full, through every season that followed. Not perfect, but true. And they never walked alone again.